What I would like to do is really to give an introduction to what we're going to do today. I picked an interesting tshuva by the Rashba. The Rashba is Rabbi Shlomo ben Avraham ben Idrat. He basically, regarding his date of birth, here we have a little bit of a dispute among the chokrim, among the academics. Many people think that the Rashba was born at around 1235, and according to Simcha Emanuel, he was born probably around 1220. And this is, and the reason for that is very interesting. We found a document, he found the document, Professor Simcha Emanuel found the document that has in 1941, in 2041, that has the Rashba signature on a business transaction. Now, if he was born in 1235, it means that he signed this deal when he was 6 years old. So he was very smart, but not that smart, to sign his name on a transaction document at the age of 6 years old. So therefore, Professor Emanuel suggested that the Rashba was born around 1220. Everyone agreed that he died in 1310. Now, why is that so important? So if he was born in 1220 and died in 1310, you're talking about a rabbi who was obviously in Barcelona, in Spain. He was a huge Talmid Chacham. I'll give you some more information about him because it is important to understand the tshuva that I'm going to share with you in a few minutes. And he lived basically in 2 centuries, in the 13th century, in the beginning of the 14th century as well, in Spain. He really was not a dayan who was appointed by the Kehillah. He was a very wealthy person. He was a leader in the community, but he was appointed by the king to be somewhat of the community representative. He had a yeshiva, he was a dayan, but basically he didn't want to have any formal position. However, he was an incredible person and personality. And one of the things that he is also very known is that, I don't know if you know, but the Rosh, Rabbi Asher, who was a student of the Maharam Rothenburg in Germany, the Rosh, Rabbi Asher, fled Germany and arrived to Spain. And when the Rashba heard that he arrived to Spain, he appointed him to be a chief rabbi in one of the cities in Spain, and gave him tremendous honor and really promoted him. So Rosh, Rabbi Asher, lived part of his life in Germany. That's where his Torah came from, and then he moved to Spain. Now, the Rashba, there are probably close to 2,000 tshuvot that we have from the Rashba. However, I would just tell you that not all of them belong to the Rashba. Some of them belong to the Ramban and others, but we are talking about hundreds of tshuvot that you have from the Rashba, which give us a tremendous view on who asked the question, where the questions came from, and many times you can learn from the tshuvot a lot about the communities that asked in the question. Economical conditions, spiritual conditions, social conditions, and it's very interesting because the Rashba, who lived in Spain, he received questions from friends, from obviously from Spain, but from France as well, but also from Akko. There is an interesting thing in the Shelot V'Tshuvot of the Rashba. You have few questions of a Jew in Akko, in Eretz Israel, who learned Masechet Yevamot, and Masechet Yevamot is a hard Masechet, and he probably didn't have a Chavruta. So what did he do? He sent his questions to the Rashba, thinking that the Rashba would be his Chavruta. And the Rashba, with tremendous savlanut, answered him most of the questions. So even a Jew in Akko, found his way to, you can imagine, you have a question on a daf that you learn, you send a letter to the Rashba, you get an answer 6 months later, what do? You continue to learn? Do you wait for the tshuva? I don't know. That would be very interesting. But that's basically the Rashba. Now, why am I telling you all of that? So what you need to remember from all my introduction is Rashba, Spain, tremendous Talmid Chacham, a very wealthy person, was not formally appointed, but was appointed by the king and by the Kehillah to be the representative, and received questions from all over the place, but especially also from France. Now, why am I telling you about France? There's something very interesting in France. We know that the glory of the Jewish community in France and the spiritual development and the learning experience of Balei Tosfot in France, basically, let's say, started with Rashi. Rashi lived from 1040 to 1105. And then we have Rabbeinu Tam, and we have Ria Zaken, Rabbi Yitzchak Midampier, and then we have Rabbi Shimshon Mishan. Those are the Baalei Tosfot. Those are the people who basically, the Talmidei Chachamim that established the Tosfot. But something happened towards the beginning of the 13th century in France. As you know, there was an expulsion from France in 1305 or 1306, but that's the beginning of the 14th century. But already in the 13th century, the level of intensity of learning and development in France is going down a bit. And Spain becomes more of a Jewish center. Don't worry, until 1492, that's it. Then there is expulsion from Spain. So Baruch Hashem, you know, Jews don't stay in one place more than 200 years, you know, something like that. But basically what happened was that in Spain, there is more of a movement towards what? Towards Torah in Spain. So in Germany, until the Maharam Rothenburg passed away or was murdered or whatever the story is about him. So there is a Jewish center in Germany, there is a Jewish center in France, and now there is a rising star in Spain. There is a new Jewish center in Spain. So now you have a little bit of an overview, and now let's see the tshuva. The tshuva, or the she'ela, the question and the answer, is very interesting, very intriguing. So let's see. Okay, so let's make it a bit bigger. Okay. שו"ת הרשב"א, חלק א', סימן ת"ס. מנואשקה. What is מנואשקה? So I put it for you here. השאלה נשלחה כנראה מדרום צרפת. The question to the Rashba was sent probably from southern France, closer to Spain. מנואשקה הינה עיר מנוסק בדרום צרפת. So south of France. So it's basically, I don't want to call it a border city between Spain and France, but it's closer to Spain. So now, before we even start the question, let's just have our bearings. So you have a kehillah, or the question comes from where? From France, and they send it to Spain. Interestingly enough, because there are still rabbis in France, tremendous Talmidei Chachamim. I don't know what year that question was sent. If it was sent after 1305, I can understand, even though I want to tell you that with the expulsion from France, many Jews found themselves later on where? In Provence, what we call South France. So it might be that, you know, there was nothing, no one to ask, or maybe they just thought the Rashba, who became such a famous posek, he should make the psak. But it's interesting that you have a question from France that goes to Spain and does not stay locally. Now, why is that important? You need to wait. So now let's see the she'ela. Let's see the question. So the question is the following. מנואשקה, שאלת. So you asked. מעשה היה בתלמיד אחד שלמד בפני רבו רוב ימיו. So there is the question is about a student who learned by a rabbi most of his years. So he stayed in this rabbi's yeshiva for, I don't know, many years. והלך לפני רב אחר. And then he left his first rabbi and he went to learn by another rabbi. וסיפר על רבו הראשון דברים של לעד, ושם פסול לדורות, לו ולזרעו. This is becoming now interesting. What's the story? The story is, let's say, Reuven, he learned by Rabbi Moshe Rabbeinu, okay? He learned by Rabbi Moshe. And he learns most of his years by Rabbi Moshe. Rabbi Moshe is teaching him, from the Aleph Bet until Tosfot. He knows everything from this rabbi. This student, this Reuven, goes to another rabbi, to learn by another rabbi. That's fine, no problem. What's the problem? This student goes to the second rabbi and says to the second rabbi, my first rabbi, he is nothing. He doesn't know how to learn. He doesn't know how to teach. And also, between you and me, I think his lineage, his family lineage is problematic. He has some issues. Now, why would Reuven, the student, will do something like that? Maybe to find favor in the eyes of this rabbi. Maybe he knew that there is animosity between the rabbis. I don't know why. But this guy who learned in yeshiva for so many years with one rabbi goes to another rabbi and basically badmouths his first rabbi, A, about his scholarship, and B, shemet psul, which means he says, I suspect that his lineage is not exactly kosher. You with me? Everyone is with me with a question? We don't have a question yet. We have a description of the surrounding, of the background. But you see, first and foremost, just as a side note, מה שהיה הוא שיהיה. Okay, people like to badmouth. People go from one rabbi to another. They schmooze around. Okay, so we have it also in the 13th century. So now, what's the question? So not yet, we still have the story. What's the story? וכששמע הרב עמד מרעיד, and when the first rabbi, when he heard what his dedicated student did, that he went to another rabbi and he badmouthed him, קרא בקול גדול לכל בני חבורתו היושבים לפניו. So he gathered all the students that were learning by him, כ-22 איש נבונים. Do you see that, by the way? How many students this rabbi had? 22. This is something that I want to just take a moment and to share with you. We are used to say, oh, he has a yeshiva, hundreds of people, It was not like that in the 13th century. When someone says he had a yeshiva, you're talking about 20 to 30, 40 people. Okay? Now, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. So, Rabbeinu Tam had maybe 10 students, but see what he did. Rashi had few students, see what he did. Basically, what do we have? We have this student who learned by the first rabbi, went to another rabbi, badmouthed his first rabbi. The first rabbi hears about the fact that his students badmouthed him and said horrible things about him. So what does he do? He gathers all the students together, and then he says the following. He says, ולקח ספר התורה. He took the Torah from the Aron Kodesh, ואמר, and he said, על דעת המקום ועל דעתכם. He says, with the consent of God and with your consent, אני מנדה ומחרים ומשמט האיש ההוא המספר עלז הרע עליי, אם הוא מתלמידיי, אם פיו דיבר שווא. וענו כולם ואמרו אמן, כן רבינו, אנחנו מסכימים על ידך, וליהבי העוגב רדאפקה לקלה בשמתה. So what do we have? So basically, this rabbi, the first rabbi, we call him Rabbi Moshe, right? Rabbi Moshe is the first rabbi. He hears about what his student did to him and the way he badmouthed him. He stands up, he takes the Sefer Torah, and he says like that, with the consent of God and with your consent, I am going to excommunicate. I am going to put in cherem his student because the way he spoke about me and because of the lies, the despicable accusations that he has against me in terms of my lineage, and I am going to put it in cherem. And the students said amen, and they said he should be in cherem for what he did to you. So now we still don't have a question. I'm still describing to you the story. So you have a student who is a horrible person, badmouth his first rabbi. The first rabbi reacts. By the way, I'm surprised that no one of you raised his hand and says, 1 second, why the second rabbi didn't say to the student, I don't want to hear it. Lashon hara lo medaber elai, right? I don't want to hear you bad-mouthing your first rabbi. You don't want to be with him, fine. You are more than welcome here, but why to accept something like this? But we will deal with it. But for now, we have that the first rabbi took an action and he said, I'm going to put this guy in cherem. And the student agreed with him. Okay. However, you thought that what we have here in Israel, politics, is interesting. 13th century politics is not less interesting than the 21st century politics. וכשירצו הדברים לפני אותו רב שהלך לפניו, עמד על רגליו והתיר נידוים. So, the story does not end there. The first rabbi put the student in cherem. The rumor gets to whom? To the second rabbi. When the second rabbi heard that the first rabbi put this student in cherem, what did he do? He stood up and said, Nishta cherem, there is no cherem. I am going to undo this cherem, meaning the first rabbi has no right to put my student, who was his student, in cherem. Why not? Why not? Now take a look. Everyone is with me with the case, right? With the story. Everyone is, okay, good. So, ואמר, כי בשכבר הסכימו רבני צרפת, שלא ינדה שום חכם לכבודו. Now, that's interesting. What do we have here? The second rabbi said, look, the cherem that the first rabbi put the student is null and void. Why? Because years ago, all the French rabbis sat together and they decided that a rabbi cannot put students in cherem if they hurt or if they did something against his honor. You can put someone in cherem if he did something against the community, if he did something horrible, but if he did something against a rabbi, the rabbi cannot put him in cherem. Now, before we even continue with the tshuva, what do we have? You have two rabbis. We are not sure who asked the question. Could you think ask the question? You can have two options. You can, what's the problem here? The first rabbi put the student in cherem. The second rabbi says that the first rabbi has no right to put this student in cherem. And therefore the cherem is what? Null and void. There is no cherem, nothing. Why? Because the rabbis, the French rabbis, they made an agreement that a rabbi cannot put any student in cherem. So now what's the question? Is there a cherem or there is no cherem, right? Is the first rabbi is right and he has the authority to make a cherem, or the second rabbi is right, and because the French rabbis made this agreement, so you need to follow it. So now when you ask yourself, okay, who is asking the question? Is the first rabbi asking the question? And he asks the Rashba, can you please tell me if my cherem still applies? Or the second rabbi asks the question and says, is me violating the cherem and saying there is no cherem, am I right? So the question can come from both ends. That's A. B, which is very, very interesting. When you learn she'elot v'tshuvot, it's fascinating. A second rabbi said what? The second rabbi said that the first rabbi could not put this student in cherem. Why? Because there is an agreement of a bunch of French rabbis who maybe obviously were before both of them, and they made an agreement that a rabbi cannot put a student in cherem if this student just did something against the rabbi itself. Now, two things. When you think logically, when rabbis comes along and they gather together and they make an agreement or make an enactment or a decree, they do it probably in what? In one of two reasons. A, as a reaction to a phenomena, or B, when they see that something is coming, so they want to what? To prevent it. So preemptive or reaction. What was the agreement? The agreement of the French rabbis was what? That a chacham, a rabbi, cannot put in cherem a student that did something against him. So if you say it was a reaction, so what was the phenomena? Every time that a student said something against the rabbi did what? Put him in cherem. So basically, what did he do? Obviously, no one wants to be in cherem, so everyone was afraid of the rabbi. And the rabbis felt that if they would continue to do it, no one would like to be a student. So therefore, they said, you know what, a rabbi, if your student said something against you, you need to be careful. You can't put him in cherem. That's reaction. If we say preemptive, is that the rabbi saw that it's coming, so they decided, you know what, you can't take it personally. Sometimes at the heat of the moment, at the heat of the discussion, when the rabbi has a conversation with the student might say something that insults the rabbi, but that's not a good reason to do what? To put this guy in cherem. Okay. So you immediately hear in the 13th century, there is some kind of tension between rabbis and students. Now put that aside. That, by the way, I'm just taking a step back. When you read the tshuva, especially from the Middle Ages, but every other year as well, we need to analyze it not only for the bottom line, okay, what's the psak, but to try to see it holistically, which means let's talk about the history of the tshuva. Let's try to derive some kind of insight to the period of time in history. So when the tshuva says, oh, there is a takana, there is this enactment of the French rabbis, so you need to ask yourself a very simple question. Why would you do such a takana? So now, when we understand some possibilities regarding the takana, so the second rabbi says the first rabbi had no right to put this student in cherem. Why? Because of those French rabbis who created that agreement. Now, what was the basic assumption of the second rabbi? The basic assumption of the second rabbi was what? That the first rabbi must oblige by the agreement of the French rabbi, right? That's why he has no right to put this student in cherem. Now, the question reached whom? The Rashba. Where was the Rashba? In France? The Rashba was in Spain. Ma kesher? You are talking about an agreement that was done by the French rabbis. Why do you ask Esfardi. Yeah. So asking a posek from Spain regarding an agreement that was made by French rabbis. Answer, and this is speculation. Speculation number one is that the first rabbi was where? In Spain. And the second rabbi was in France. Therefore, the French rabbi, the second rabbi, thought, look, I follow the French rabbi. So the first rabbi, I don't care where he is, he can't put in cherem a student. Option number two is no, both rabbis were in France. However, and this is a very interesting and deep question, how strong and authoritative are the French rabbis in France, and especially in southern France? You need to know France in the 13th century was not like what we know France today. France was divided to different regions, and what we call Provence was a different region. So I might sit in Paris, okay? I am Rabbi Yechiel Paris, okay? Or I'm Rabbi Yehuda Sirlion. I don't care who am I from the 13th century, but I sit in Paris. And I sit in Paris and I make this enactment that a rabbi cannot put in cherem a student. But the question is my enactment in Paris influence Provence in southern France? Or does it influence Manusk? This is the city that sent the Sheila, the question to the Rashba. Maybe they are not obligated to follow. Which means the question that we're going to ask today, and by the way, I'm not going to give a full answer to it because I really don't know, is that what is the, I will call it the location of influence, okay? How many regions are basically obligated to follow an enactment that was done in a different city? Because don't forget, there is no one law that, basically govern everyone. Everyone has a rabbi in his city, in the village. And by the way, not everything, the communication does not go so smoothly. It's not like that, I am the chief rabbi of Yerushalayim. I send an email to all the shuls and I say to them, okay, from now on, we say Atikva every day. It doesn't work like that. And also, who told me that I have the right to tell you what to do in your shul, or in your city? However, the second rabbi who said that the cherem should be null and void, he thought that what? That the first rabbi who put the student in cherem had no right to do it. Why? Because that first rabbi needed to follow the agreement that was made by the French rabbi. Okay. By the way, the story does not end yet. Wait. So now, Ve'amar, so the first rabbi, when he heard that the second rabbi said that his cherem is nothing, he says no. שהתרתו אינה כלום. לפי שאותה הסכמה שאמר אינה כי לא שמענוע מעולם. So the first rabbi says, the second rabbi, I don't know what he's talking about. I never heard about such an agreement by the French rabbi. I never heard in my life that the rabbis got together in France and they decided that a Talmid Chacham cannot put a student in cherem. Never heard about it. B, ואפילו הייתה לא פשטה עלינו. Now this is so interesting. He says, and let's say that such an agreement exists, it never came to our cities. My city does not need to follow this agreement. ועוד, and also, שאינו באפשר שהסכימו הם על הוצאת שום לעז שמוציא תלמיד על רבו, ששימש לפניו רוב ימיו. And he says, and also, he says, even if there is a takana like that, that I was not aware, and let's say that I should oblige, that I should follow such a takana, I want to tell you that I cannot believe that the French rabbi will say that if the Talmid basically badmouthed my lineage and said that I am not a good Jew, or that my mother or my father did something horrible, that even in such a case, that the French rabbis will say that I cannot put in cherem this student. It's impossible. Meaning, I can understand that if the student called the rabbi, you are not smart, that I shouldn't put him in cherem. But if he told me that my father married someone who was converted in a way that it was not accepted, and this and that and the other, that I am sure that even the French rabbis will agree that I can put him in cherem. And the fourth reason, he says, ועוד אחרת, כי התלמידים נידו גם כן, והם לא נידו לכבוד עצמם כי אם לכבוד רבם. And he says also, my students were there, and the students themselves put the other students in cherem. They didn't do it for their own sake and for their own honor. They did it for the rabbi. So that's not part of the takana. ועוד לא יידחה תלמוד ערוך שבידינו מפני גזירתם. And also, says the first rabbi, with all due respect to the French rabbis, in the Talmud, it says that what? That the Talmid Chacham can put a student in cherem. So with all due respect to the French rabbis, I'm going to do it. This is the question. So now, let me go through the story. Let me detail you again the question, and then we will see what the Rashba has to say. So, we have a student, Reuven. He learned by Reb Moshe for many years. Then he goes to Reb Aaron. And when he goes to Reb Aaron, he says to him, you know, Reb Moshe that I learned by him for many years, he's nothing. He is not a Talmid Chacham, he's nothing, but also, not only that he's not a Talmid Chacham, I think that he's not a kosher Jew. He has some issues with his family. The second rabbi accepted, I don't know what he did. The first rabbi hears about it, and he says, oh, he takes the Sefer Torah out, he brings the students, 22 of them, and he said, I put this student in cherem for what he did. And the Talmidim says, Amen, and they said we should put him in cherem. The second rabbi hears about the cherem and says, there is no cherem. It's null and void. There is nothing there. Why? Because the French rabbis, a few years ago, or 100 years ago, I don't know when, they created an agreement that a Talmid Chacham cannot put a student in cherem. The first rabbi hears about it, and he says, Ma pitom. I never heard about something like that. And even if there is something like that, such an agreement by the French rabbi, my city, we never heard about it, we never agreed to it, so I'm not obligated to follow. Third, even if there is one, and let's say that a rabbi before me accepted it upon my city, I cannot believe that the French rabbis will not agree with me that if he tried to disregard my family lineage and to basically say that I'm not a kosher Jew, that I cannot put him in cherem. Fourth, even he's doing like that. He says, the case is here what? I put him in cherem, but also who else put him in cherem? My students. And my students are definitely not in that agreement. And the fifth one is what? And the fifth one is when you look at the Talmud, we'll talk about it in a few minutes. The Talmud says that the Talmid Chacham can put in cherem a student that basically went against him. And with all due respect to the French rabbis, their enactment cannot override what we know from the Talmud. So, what's the question? The question is, who is right? The first rabbi or the second rabbi? So that's why I called this shiur, the way I titled it, Nidui Talmid Chacham, Imut Ben Keilot, a conflict between communities. What you see here, this is very interesting. You see a tradition from France that there is this enactment that a Rav, the Talmid Chacham, cannot put a student in cherem. And at the same time, there is a question of influence, meaning how much influence that enactment has. What are the localities that must follow that enactment? And C, do people know about it? And do people know the content of that agreement? So who do they ask? They ask the Rashba. The Rashba is being asked, okay, is the cherem apply or does not? Phil.
I'm fascinated by two questions. One is the power of secular geographic lines. That's one. And second, nobody said, let's check if what he's saying is true. This sounds because a COVID discussion, rather than, was it justified? It may have been justified. The student may have been a rat. The rabbi would be a tzaddik, vice versa. I would have thought somebody would put a committee and find out what the circumstances were.
So for the second question, I will tell you, that's easier than the first one. The second question is no one is interested in the truth. Everyone loves gossip. And you can have a committee and a subcommittee and an extra committee and a supreme committee, and they will come up with the findings. But it's like, a newspaper. On the front page, you have an accusation against someone. And if it was proven to be false, then you have at the last page or the page before the last, you have a little muda'ah. We are so sorry about the incorrect information, and no one reads it and no one cares. So basically, it might be that they try to understand what's going on with that lineage of this rabbi, but no one was interested in that so much. So that's more for the second question. First question that you asked is a very important question. Geographical boundaries or lines were very vague in the Middle Ages. It was sometimes in the same city, because of different languages, it was considered as two different kehilot. And one kehillah had nothing to do with the other one. Sometimes cities, especially in the Middle Ages, were divided by what? I'm the king, and I have 10 wives, okay? Or I have, I don't know, a wife with 6 brothers, and I need to give them positions, So I take a city and I divide it to 6, what they call was New York, and like region, and each prince becomes the prince of that region, and they have maybe their accent, they have a different type of taxation, and each one of them rules his own little part of the city. So you can have a city with 3, 4. By the way, how do we know that? From Ktubot. We know it from Ktubot. Where do you draw the line? Because in Ktubah, you need to say what's the location, what's the name of the river, what's the name of the city. So it's very interesting, and you see. So your first question, Phil, is I can give a shiur on that itself. How do you define geographical borders in the Middle Ages? But it's not for now. But I will say that you are right in your question, which means it's very difficult to know. I'll give you another example, and with that I'll conclude the question. Rabbeinu Gershom Meor HaGola. Cherem de Rabbeinu Gershom.
Yeah.
That Rabbeinu Gershom, one of his enactments was, for example, that against bigotry. What do you call it? To have more than one wife. Polygamy. So only the Ashkenazim accepted it.
That's
It
right.
didn't reach the Sephardim.
To this day.
So you see that you have Gadol Batorah, he's an incredible scholar, but still, there's the influence of his enactment was limited. So we can definitely talk about it. Very good question, but the answer can sometimes vary between countries and years.
I'd like to go back to the first question. That's slander. In the case, and the court cases nowadays are full of slander cases, but they are serious cases. Nobody asked if it was true, if it was a justified question or a justified insult. Because basically, I'm familiar with rabbinic fighting, and I would say the first thing to do is say, look, if he called the guy a son of a bitch or something like that, and he wants to put him in cherem, you say, yeah, this guy said things, lies about this rabbi. It's known that he's a tzaddik, and this guy is a sourpuss. So I would think the first thing would have been to investigate the circumstances.
Yeah, but that was first. The Rashba was not asked that question. The Rashba was asked if the cherem applies or not. So that's the question. So he's not going to answer something that he was not asked. And B, as I said before, I don't think people are interested in the truth. People are not interested. People are interested in a juicy gossip, and therefore there is something to talk about for Shabbat lunch. If you don't discuss the Torah portion, you have this discussion about the rabbi. So you can have a committee, but it's not the public's interest. It might be that the rabbi himself. Look, also don't forget the cherem can achieve the same thing. If I put that student in cherem, he will need to come and to ask for forgiveness, and then he will need to say that whatever he said was wrong and was false, and it was just a false accusation. So you get the truth out of it, or maybe not. But that was not the issue. So let's go back to the tshuva, because now we need to see what the Rashba has to say.
But no slander.
He might sue him for slander, but that's again that's
we have halachas about this slander.
Yeah, but again, you see that the tool that the rabbi used in order to defend himself and to attack the student was cherem. Cherem in the Middle Ages was almost a death sentence. Basically, you are totally out of the community. And if you are a student in yeshiva and you are in cherem, you are dead, basically. So that's I think the way that the first rabbi wanted to deal with it. So now let's see what the Rashba says. So the Rashba says the following: Tshuva. תשובה, כן באמת נראה כי נידוי שנידוהו הרב ותלמידיו על אותו עלה הזרה שאמרת, נידוים נידוי וכדין נידוי כמה צדדים. First and foremost, says the Rashba, I agree with the first rabbi. The first rabbi is right, and they can put that student in cherem. Why? Now I'm going to give you the reasons. Okay, so what are the reasons? So first he says the following. The first reason is מפני שהוא רבו, והמבזה רבותיו חייב נידוי, לכבוד רבו ומוראו כמורא שמיים. So first, he says, look, this student disgraced his rabbi, and someone who disgraced the rabbi, he must be put in cherem, because we know that it says, et Hashem Elokecha, later on, it says that you need to be mechabed Hashem, that you need to honor God, and you also need to honor your rabbi. Therefore, if you insulted your rabbi, it's like insulting God, so to speak, and therefore you need to be put in cherem. Okay. ועוד, שאפילו לא היה רבו, אחר שהוא חכם ויושב בישיבה, כל אדם חייב בכבודו, ולירא ממנו, וכל כבוד חכם ומוראו, מתרבה מאת השם אלוקי חצרה. So basically he says, even if he was not his rabbi, even if he didn't learn from him all this Torah, but he was just a chacham and he sits in yeshiva and you insulted him, you deserve cherem. Why? Because in the pasuk it says what? Et Hashem Elokecha tira, and you should fear God, but it says et. Every time the word et is in a pasuk, it comes to what? To include more things. So the Gemara says that Shimon HaMusoni would make a drush for every time it says in the pasuk et. When he reached this pasuk, et Hashem Elokecha tira, he didn't know what to do. Who else do you need to fear besides God? So he basically took a step back. Rabbi Akiva came along and says, Et Hashem Elokecha tira, lerabot talmidei chachamim, which means you need to fear God, but you also need to fear the Torah scholars. It says the Rashba, there is a mitzvah from the Torah that you need to respect your rabbi. By the way, I love this shiur so much, so nice, so personal. You must fear the rabbi, and basically, if you didn't, so you're obviously going to be penalized, which one of the punishment is cherem. And then says the Rashba, ve'od yiftach bedoro k'shmuel bedoro. And also, if you want to tell me, the rabbis of today are not that smart, they are not as sophisticated as the rabbis before them, you can't say that. Because Yiftach bedoro k'Shmuel bedoro. The Tanakh compared between Yiftach and Shmuel. Now, Shmuel was a very much of a high Torah scholar, Yiftach was not exactly, but they were compared together. וכבר אמרו בערוץ דוג, דאמר דוגמה ישקוע, שנידו. Now this is an interesting sugya. This one is the Gemara in Masechet Eduyot. In Masechet Eduyot, there is a story about Akavya ben Maalalel, that he claimed that the rabbis. Let me give you an introduction. We know that when Isha Sotah comes along to the Beit HaMikdash, what do? After she decided that she's not going to admit, so the process is that you take a Megillah with the name of God and you erase it and you put it in the water and then she drinks it. Akavya ben Maalalel said that the rabbis just pretended to erase the name of God. They took a different Megillah and they erased whatever was written on there, but not the name of God, and they gave her to drink. And the rabbis were so upset with him, they put him in cherem. So I'm doing like that because that story is a very weird story. Akavya ben Maalalel, we know him from Masechet Avot. You remember? Akavya ben Maalalel אומר, הסתכל בשלושה דברים ויהיה אתה בא על ידי עבירה. Remember that? That is a Tana from Masechet Avot. And we never heard that he did something wrong. So some people say it's not Akavya ben Maalalel, maybe there are two, maybe it's not him, maybe whatever. But the idea is what? That there is a Talmid Chacham that says that really the rabbis create some kind of a deception. And he was excommunicated because of it. He didn't insult the rabbis. He just said that the rabbis didn't really want to erase the name of God. So they deceived the woman. But for that, he was excommunicated. So says the Rashba, if for something like that you are being put in cherem, even more so when you really insult the rabbi. That's what the Rashba says. And then the fourth reason, and I will go over all of it later on again, says, ועוד שאפילו שפחתו של רבי נהגו נידויה 3 שנים וכל שכן זה שהתפקר ברבו ותלמיד חכם. So then there is another story, the story in מועד קטן in דף י"ז עמוד א', where a Rabbi's maidservant, she put someone in cherem because he said something, and the rabbis accepted her cherem and continued with it for 3 years. Says the Rashba, if you accept a cherem from Rabbi's maidservant, even more so that you need to what? To accept the cherem from a Talmid Chacham. And then he says, ונידוי הרבים שהוא מנודה לכל שאין להתירו אלא מידת המניין או נשיא ובשחזר בו. So basically he says what? He says, look, the cherem is cherem, and the only way to undo this cherem is if that student comes along, apologize, ask for forgiveness, and the president of the Beit Din or whatever it is, so he will say mutar lach, so he will undo the cherem. So now, what do we have here? So what we have here is something very interesting. The question was, basically, is there this agreement that was done in France by those French rabbis? If it exists, B, what is its content? And C, does it really obligate everyone to follow that agreement? The Rashba says, no. We don't need to follow an agreement that was done in France, definitely not here in Spain, but perhaps not anywhere anymore, especially in cases like that. First and foremost, says the Rashba, you need to know that you need to respect the rabbi, especially if it was your rabbi who taught you everything. You need to fear him, you need to respect him, you need to be in awe of him. And we see two examples in the Talmud that we accepted the cherem. So therefore, the only way to undo this cherem is if the student comes along and asks forgiveness. Now, there's something interesting here. First and foremost, if I would, you know what, let's go back. The question came from where? From Manusk. As I told you, this is a city in southern France, with closer to the border to Spain. So, like many border cities, you understand that that city is being influenced by the two countries, the local country and the country behind the border. Because people come and go, it's close, so there is an influence. So I understand why the question was asked from Manusk to the Rashba. And now I'm giving you a theory in order to explain it all. My theory is the following. The first rabbi's yeshiva was in Manusk, in that city, in southern France. And the students went to a second rabbi. Where was that second rabbi? In my opinion, deeper in France. And as I told you before, that's why I gave you all this introduction at the beginning of the shiur. When you have a Torah center that was always in a high status and now it's going a little bit down, and then you have a new Torah center that rises in Spain, basically you have some tension. So the student leaves Manusk, which is closer to Spain. It's still in France, but it's closer to Spain. So he goes deep into France. He learns in yeshiva there, and he goes to the rabbi there and says to him, you know, those rabbis who are close to the Spain Torah Center, they're nothing. Don't worry about them. You know, Torah is here in France. And when the first rabbi hears about it, and he hears about how he badmouthed him, he says, that's not right. He can't do that. So I put him in cherem. So the second rabbi who is in France, he has no clue who is the Rashba, or maybe he has, but he thinks, okay, the Rashba is the Rashba, but I have my French rabbis. They are my poskim. So he says, the cherem, he can't do a cherem we are obligated to follow the French rabbis. The French rabbi says that a Talmid Chacham cannot put a student in cherem. The first rabbi says, I have no idea what he's talking about. I never heard about such an agreement. Even if there was such an agreement, my city, Manusk, which is closer to the Spain border, we don't care about those French rabbis, what they have to say. And still, that goes back to your question. We are the same country, but we are not the same kehillah. We don't need to follow their enactments. I see myself as what? Not as part of the French kehillah. I see myself as what? As part of the Spanish kehillah. My posek is the Rashba, not Rabbi Yechiel Miparim. So you see already a divide in the same country. And then, says the first rabbi, therefore, I never heard about such an enactment. Even if it exists, I don't care. And see, if you tell me that those French rabbis, basically, even in my case, will tell me that I cannot put my student in cherem, they have no clue what they are saying. Do you see? Here you have someone who is closer to sense. Those French rabbis, I don't know what they are thinking about. When the question reaches the Rashba say, he doesn't go into so much to the French agreement, the French rabbis agreement, because in my opinion, he never heard about it. He just says, look, I know the Talmud, and I know what I learned in the Talmud, and I know that I was asked the question, and I know that if a rabbi was insulted in such a way that they badmouth his capabilities of learning and teaching, and they are basically trying to disregard his lineage, this guy should be put in cherem. And therefore, says the Rashba, the cherem applies, and the only way to undo it is when the student will come, apologize, ask for forgiveness, and then it will undo by the head of the baby. Now, what did we learn from this tshuva? I think we learned a tremendous amount. Little politics is always exciting. You know, you have one rabbi says A, and the other rabbi says B, and they send it to Rabbi C, and the Rabbi C says, I don't know what Rabbi B says, so let's go with Rabbi A. And obviously you see that there is an interesting mini politics between the rabbis, but that's the least of my concerns. My major finding in this tshuva is really the two main things. A, the authority of the Rashba, who is in Spain, he is going to make a psak now for something that is outside of his jurisdiction. That's not a question from Spain, that's a question from France. And he is going to be the halachic authority, which is interesting. B, you see a regional diversity, and you see how Jewish Torah centers are on the rise and some are on the decline, and you see all sorts of takanot, of enactments that were done that obviously we have no idea where they came from, and we have no documentation for them, but we have a testimony. The second rabbi did not make it up. He really believed, the second rabbi, that there is a takana of the French rabbis that a Talmid Chacham cannot put someone in cherem. But the other rabbi, he's in France, says, I have no idea what you're talking about. The third point that I think that we can derive from this tshuva is that the Rashba also was not afraid to make a psak against what was traditionally accepted, I don't know for how long, but traditionally accepted in another country, which is obviously talks about the way he viewed himself and the way that other people view the Rashba. Meaning you're not going to ask a question about something in your locality, someone from someone else's locality, unless you think that whatever he says goes. Now, I just want to to tell you, I'm not sure what was really the end of the story, which means sometimes people ask a rabbi for tshuva, but that was not a psak. They will take his tshuva to the Beit Din. And don't forget, the other side will bring a tshuva from another rabbi, and he will bring it to the Beit Din. And the Beit Din will need to decide what tshuva to accept. Okay? So sometimes it's very interesting. I think that what that was the Maharam Rothenburg who refused to give an opinion. He says, if you are asking for a psak, I'll give it to you, but I'm not writing an opinion. So the formation of halacha and the process of halacha and the process of psak is also being touched in this tshuva a little bit. Okay, any questions? No questions.
I have it. It's more a statement. I saw that with the cherem of Rabbi Gershon. It's his territory, but the territory has nothing to do whether it's France, Upper France, Lower France, or something like that. It really should go back to what is the Jewish tradition. So, for example, currently, I have a friend, a very religious friend, who defends dairy on the basis that a Beis Din didn't convict him. It was the Beis Din, it was a court, theft on the court. The Beis Din is important. It's a question of who do you accept as an authority.
Okay, and I will add one more question, Phil, to you, and I'm going to give you an answer that's going to add another question. When there is an enactment, how detailed it needs to be, A. B, what is a reasonable time for that enactment to continue on? You know, do we say that something that was enacted in France in the 12th century should obligate me on the 21st century in Israel? And this is a major question that obviously has tremendous ramifications, not only to enactments that were done in the Middle Ages, but enactments that were done in the time of the Talmud.
Yeah.
So this is obviously I don't want to call it a Pandora box, but this is a very loaded question. What do you do with enactments, with takanot, with gzerot that were done for a specific reason, especially sometimes some of them are detailed, meaning because of this phenomena, here is the enactment. What really happens when this phenomena is gone, vanished? Do you continue the enactment? Do you continue the decree, or you say, no, batel atam, batla takana? And this is something that, you know, has so much to talk about and really no conclusion at the end, almost. So maybe on a different show we can do that too.
Well, a shir that you gave a long time ago that I remember is about the shaming of a Talmid Chacham. That it's a grave matter, and whether it's right or wrong is always a discussion. Sometimes it isn't. It continues to this day.
That's true, and will continue. So everyone, have a good day. I'll see many of you tonight at 8. Later out.